one thing that sets Aspies apart, people with Asperger syndrome apart from autism in general, is that they tend to be highly intelligent, or more accurately, they have average to higher intelligence than people in general on the autism spectrum. And so we use the term high-functioning autism. So yeah, they are on the spectrum, and we're all autistics, but there is a group of autistics who are high-functioning, and one of the ways they make that distinction is they tend to be, again, people with higher IQs, highly intelligent, or at least have average intelligence. Well, that raises a question. What kind of an Asperger syndrome person are you? What kind of an Aspie are you? Are you a dumb Aspie or are you a smart Aspie? Well, if you're a dumb Aspie, then typically they would say you're not an Aspie at all. You have to have at least a moderate level of intelligence. So we have a little quiz here, 13 questions, to find out whether or not you are a smart Aspie. So let's go through this, and you tell me in the comments section which of these you check off. And I doubt that anybody checks all of them off. I know that I don't, but some of them you're probably going to say, yeah, that describes me very well. Number one is this. Do you know that you don't know? People with high intelligence know that they don't know. In fact, people with higher levels of intelligence actually tend to underestimate their intelligence. Now, I've noticed this interesting phenomenon where people who brag about how smart they are usually are not highly intelligent at all. The reason is, I believe, that people who are smart don't have to brag about it because it's very obvious. But even then, they don't estimate their intelligence to be anywhere near as high as it is. So question number one, do you know that you don't know? And if the answer is yes, I know there's a lot of things that I don't know, then chances are you have a higher than average IQ. And this, by the way, is not a scientific quiz. This is something that I put together from life's experience. You know, I'm pushing 70 years old. I've learned a thing or two. I just want to share with you some of these things that I have learned. And these are some of the things that I have learned about people who have high levels of intelligence, particularly those who are on the spectrum and identified as high-functioning autistics. Number two is this. Are you objective? Now, to explain that, are you objective, we need to understand that people who have a high level of intelligence tend to be open-minded to different viewpoints. Now, there are obviously some exceptions to this, but, I know a lot of people who are highly intelligent, and they've got a mindset, and you simply cannot shake them no matter what you tell them, but that's kind of rare. You see that more commonly with people who are not quite as intelligent. So, are you a smart Aspie? Well, if you tend to be objective, if you are open-minded to different viewpoints, then chances are you're a smart Aspie. So if you are one of those people who listens to different perspectives, even though you know they're totally nuts. For example, I have people who tell me the earth is flat. I have people who tell me that the moon landing was a hoax. Okay, I listen to them. Because I'm not afraid of their argument. Whatever it is, I'll listen to it, and I understand that there's a lot of people who believe those things, but there's a lot of smart people who don't believe those things. And there's a reason why people believe those things, and there's a reason why people don't believe those things. And those are just two examples of hundreds or maybe thousands. So why not? If you're highly intelligent, why not listen to them? Now, I don't typically argue with those people because, quite frankly, it's a waste of time. And it doesn't matter. It could be a religious perspective. It could be a political perspective. You can listen to people, but I think it's a waste of time to argue with them because chances are you're not going to change their mind, and they're not going to change my mind unless they have something that's really good. So what's the point of arguing? Listening is one thing. Arguing is another. Well, there is a downside to that, and people with Asperger syndrome tend to be gullible. I can't tell you how many times And I'm one of those people. I can't tell you how many times that I have fallen for people who have, I hate to say scammed me, but effectively, yeah, that's what they did. Grifters come along and they've got this great idea. You know, if you just do this, we'll do this. And find out they're just stealing money from you. So the question is, are you objective? Or we could say, are you open-minded to those who disagree with you? At least, maybe not to argue with them, but at least listen, see what they got. Number 3 is this. Are you introspective? Now, what is the antonym for introspective? I guess it would be outrospective. What that means is we look inside rather than outside. We tend to be thinkers. We tend to be quiet. We like to assess things on our own. We don't like other people constantly in our ear, on our back, in our ear, all over our bodies, telling us things that they believe, trying to convince us. Okay, yeah, we will listen to you, but we need to have some time to sit back and contemplate. Now, if you know anything about dangerous cults, you know, one of the things they try to do is get people isolated. And it's surprising how many highly intelligent people fall for dangerous cults, not just religious cults, but sometimes they are political cults. But highly intelligent people sometimes fall for those things, and the reason is because they stop being introspective. And what the cults like to do is they like to get you isolated. They like to get their members at a compound, somewhere away from the influences of society, where they have the only input or only access to their brain. So think of it in these terms. When you have that pressure, that social pressure from a crowd, for example, if you were to go to a place where they only speak Chinese, it's not going to be long before you start speaking Chinese. I know I spent a couple weeks in China back when, and you can't help it. Even if you don't try to learn Chinese, you're going to start picking things up, picking up words and expressions. One of the things the Chinese like to do is say, yeah, yeah, yeah. That means yes. Something they picked up from us, but they express it a little bit differently. And next thing you know, you're saying, yeah, 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 right along with them. Can't help it. So cults like to get people isolated from their environment, but they like to put them into a different environment, an alternative environment, where they have this pressure to believe something that is alternative from what they would normally believe if they were being introspective. People with Asperger syndrome don't like that. We don't like to be in those tight groups. We like to be by ourselves where we can think things through without somebody else. Again, being on our shoulder, being in our ear, wherever, trying to tell us what we should and should not believe, trying to alter our sense of reality. We even avoid small talk. By and large, we find it uncomfortable. We find it stressful. It makes us anxious. So the question is, are you introspective? And if you're one of those people who likes to be alone to think, not having people bug you and telling you what you should think, but you like to think through it yourself after you listen to them, then there's a possibility that you are a smart Aspie. Now, the downside of that is, of course, that we tend to be socially challenged. And sometimes that input that we need to make decisions, not always there. It is good to hear other people's opinions on things. But then again, with the advent of the internet and the overwhelming access to information makes that aspect of socializing, well, really it's just kind of obsolete. I mean, it's good to hang out with people just to hang out with them, because that's part of mental health, being associated with other people. So there is a downside where you miss that part of it. But the part about the input of information, you just log on to the internet, there it is. Number 4 is this. Are you undeterred? Now, by that, we mean that people with Asperger syndrome know that they have flaws. we talk about those flaws all the time. Some people don't call them flaws; they call them deficits. I guess, yeah, we're in my mind, people are way too sensitive about these things. But whatever, I don't want to offend anybody. So let's call them deficits. So yeah, we do have a deficit when it comes to socializing. We have deficits in a lot of things, and sometimes our deficits are actually abundances. For example, we tend to have high vocabularies, large vocabularies, I should say, and we tend to use them. Some people see that as a deficit because it annoys people, and it makes it difficult to communicate with the average person, because we are using words and terminologies that they may know them, but they're just not normal. So people see that as a deficit. So what we're saying here is that in spite of those deficits, we just keep on going. We understand it. Okay, I got this deficit. So my hair is messy most of the time. So I do like clothing that is kind of bland. So I do have a sensitivity to stimulation, talking about lights and sound. Okay, I understand I have those things that people would call flaws or deficits, but I'm going to keep on moving. Highly intelligent people are undeterred by those speed bumps. And if it's a huge speed bump and you can't even get your vehicle over it, smart people figure out a way to get around it so they can go on down the road. They find out, they discover an alternate path. Number 5 is this. Highly intelligent people, smart aspies, tend to have very strong impulse control. Another word for impulse control is self-control. Executive function, part of your frontal cortex. So you aren't ticked off quite as easily as other people would be. Now, I'm not saying that you don't experience road rage, but you're less likely to experience road rage. If you have to stand in line and you don't want to stand in line, you don't necessarily throw a hissy fit while you're standing there. There are a lot of different examples we could think of, but I think you get the point. And the point is, we just don't fall apart every time we don't get our way. We understand when we go into a business that they may be extremely busy, and it may take some time for them to wait on us. We don't get mad about it. We see what's going on. We figure out that. Instantly we figure out. We make an assessment of the circumstances, and we just don't get mad. People try to trigger us, and we respond with the flat effect. I think maybe that's one of the reasons why Aspies tend to be bullied, particularly when they're children, is because they're in control. And say in grade school, other kids try to pick on you and try to trigger you, get a rise out of you, but you're in control. And so they try even harder. They're just dead determined they're going to bully you until you react rather than respond. But that is a sign of high intelligence, high impulse control. So do you have that? Now, a downside of that is what I just mentioned, not only that we're bullied, but I call this the doormat syndrome. You know, we look at the big picture. Highly intelligent people tend to look at the big picture, and we ask ourselves, is this thing really worth fighting over? You know, probably not. And people sense that as a weakness. So they use you for a person that they can take advantage of to boost their ego. Again, it is bullying. And by the way, people never grow out of that. When I was a kid, I thought, it'd be nice to be an adult because they don't bully each other. Well, I was wrong. It doesn't matter how old you get. I know people in their 70s, even in their 80s, who are a bit bullyish, if that's a word. Number 6 is this. Are you aware of your faults? Are you aware of your shortcomings? This is kind of like the one we mentioned a little bit earlier, but we understand that highly intelligent people, I should say, smart aspies, understand that self-worth and ego is not the same thing. So we do acknowledge our faults. You know, again, we talked about this a second ago, but we know all those things that come with being an Aspie. We're aware of them. We don't say, well, that hurts my ego, so I'm going to pretend that's not a fault. We accept it. Now, we may try to improve ourselves, which I think is a positive thing, even though I'm perfectly happy being an Aspie. And we may try to mask, which I think also is often, though not always, but is often a good thing, because sometimes circumstances require us not to act like we're home in our pajamas, you know? It's just a matter of common courtesy to do a little bit of masking, and everybody does that. They, to some extent, and that's a good thing, because protocol requires it to get along with other people, which is, you know, for society to function, we got to do that. Smart people, smart Aspies, are aware of their faults. Earlier, we called them shortcomings or deficits. Number 7 is this. Are you quick-witted? Aspies a lot of times can be flat out funny. I mean, they're just hilarious. They don't think they are, but sometimes they come up and have little quips that they say that just knock you over. I read somewhere that people who are professional comedians tend to have higher IQs. Who would have known? They're so smart that they can make a living acting dumb. But these people are smart because they have a different perspective. They have a way of looking at things that other people don't have. That just flat out fits the profile of an Aspie. We do have a different perspective. And you add timing and presence of mind, you can take that different perspective and you can make it funny. Now, I don't think I'm a particular funny guy, and I know this absolutely positively. If I try to be funny, I'm not funny at all. I've tried to amuse people, and they're not amused. So, you know, if I think of something witty that comes in my mind, I may say it. But trying to do it, better leave that one alone. There's a downside to this, and that is we don't always grasp other people's sarcasm. Now, we may be very gifted or very talented with our own sarcasm, with our own wit. Yeah, we get that perfectly well, and we wonder sometimes why other people aren't catching on. But then when they use sarcasm, we don't get it. A lot of times we do, but more often than typical people, neurotypical people, we don't get it. We still get it frequently, but not as frequently as neurotypical people. Number 8 is this question. Put it as a question. Are you creative? Smart Aspies are more likely to be creative because they focus and they are thoughtful. This kind of goes along with being alone. You are thoughtful when you're by yourself. You don't have competition for your thoughts. You're able to think and you're able to focus. Have you ever tried to count money when somebody's talking to you? And your brain starts to compete with what you're thinking about and what this person is saying. And so you start counting out loud so you can override this competition for your thoughts. It's kind of the same thing with creativity. To be creative, you kind of like to be alone. So if you are a painter, an artist, chances are you want to go someplace where you don't have a lot of distractions. Maybe you have a room in your house where, if you're an artist, if you're a painter, where you can be secluded and you can paint by yourself. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to that. You go to a busy shopping area, and chances are often you'll find a street artist, and they're undeterred by all the hubbub that is around them. So it's not a mandate that you be by yourself. But we do tend to be creative, or that is to say, smart Aspies tend to be creative more so than others. So that is part of thinking outside the box, where other people cut and dry. They see it exactly the way that it is, but we have a different perspective. We're highly intelligent. Autistics tend to have a different perspective. We can see it a different way. We can put it together a way that other people can't put it together. Now, the thing that I love about that is inventors, you may have noticed, they're not all Aspies, but I should say a high percentage of them seem to be people with Asperger syndrome because they get alone, they think, and they come up with a better way of doing things. Stop and think about all the inventions that have come along in the last, 200 years. You know, the way people lived 200 years ago, I don't know how they did it. By and large, they didn't have indoor plumbing, they didn't have electricity, air conditioning, open your window. No screens because they hadn't been invented yet. So most of the inventions that we have come along in relatively recent times. Who invented all this stuff? Well, all of them weren't Aspies, but a significant number of them probably were Aspies. So the question is, number 8, are you creative? Okay, we're running short on time here, so let me just mention these next ones very quickly. Number 9 is, do you have a strong sense of self-identity? You know who you are. You have values and you have convictions. And yes, you do listen to other people's point of view, but once you analyze everything, you could draw a conclusion, and you know what is right, you know what is wrong, you know what is correct, you know what is incorrect. And so you have this strong sense of who you are and what you believe. And because of that, even though you listen to other perspectives, that doesn't mean you're going to be derailed by them because you are able to evaluate their credibility. So you have a strong sense of identity. You know who you are. Now, one of the things we've learned about brainwashing is that people with a strong sense of identity, they're hard to brainwash. Very difficult to brainwash. Now, it depends on where you are, but if you are in if you're in a situation that is highly authoritarian or even fascist and you are resistant to brainwashing, you may get shot. I would say that is a downside, but you do have a strong sense of identity. Number 10 question is this: do you have a wide interest spectrum? Everybody knows the thing about people with Asperger syndrome is we focus on something intently. We become almost obsessed with it, but it's not one thing. We have several things. And we may go from thing to thing. We may have something that we're keenly interested in, and we delve into it, and we become almost single-minded, but then something else comes along, and now we got 2 of them, so we're now double-minded. We have 2 things that we're focused on. So do you have a wide interest perspective, and if you do, then you may be a smart Aspie. Number 11, do you prefer solitude? Now, this is something we don't have to talk about a lot because we already talked about it in some detail, but you are perfectly content to be by yourself. Maybe not all the time, but let's say that let's say that they're trying to brainwash you, and you're in a communist society or you're in a fascist country, and they say, we're going to brainwash this guy. We're going to take him and put him in solitary confinement. And they're amazed that it doesn't work because you're perfectly content to be left alone. Okay, you get out 1 hour a day to do exercise, and you can't wait to get back in your cell. Okay, that's probably extreme, but you get the point. Being left alone is not punishment to a person with Asperger syndrome, but highly intelligent people actually prefer usually to be left alone. That's not to say they don't like social interaction, but their preference. Leave me alone so I can recharge and think. Number 12 is this: highly intelligent people like patterns. So the question, phrase it as a question, form it as a question, frame it as a question. Are you good at finding patterns? That's one of the tests they sometimes give to people who have Asperger syndrome is they will find something that has hidden images in it, and they'll see how long it takes you to find that image. Highly intelligent autistics, smart Aspies, are pretty good at finding those pictures. Another thing they would do, another thing they will do sometimes is scramble words, and you're able to unscramble. All right, so let's take the letters O, P, T, and S. Take a minute and think how many different words you can make with those four letters. O, P, T, and S. And then in the comment section, tell us what word you came up with, or words, because there's a lot of them. Let's see if you can do that. Number 13, and finally, smart Aspies tend to have what we call affective empathy. Now you got to keep in mind that a lot of times people say that one of the hallmarks of Asperger syndrome is they lack empathy. That's because they're talking about different kinds of empathy. There is affectionate empathy and there is cognitive empathy, and they are not the same. Affective empathy simply means you're affectionate. I don't know about you, but I don't like to be hugged. I don't even like to shake people's hands. Fist bump, I'm okay with that. Don't touch me anymore. Don't come up to me and give me a hug. It drives me crazy. When people want to do that, I usually let them, but I try to get away from them as quickly as I can without being rude. But we're still affectionate. If you see a person who is alone, you wonder, why are they alone? Are they depressed? Are they hurting inside? Is there something going on there? And you feel for that person. Well, what about cognitive empathy? That is where you are able to pick up on what people are thinking through body language, through facial expressions. Psychopaths tend to be very, very good at picking up on those signs. So they have what we call cognitive empathy. People with Asperger syndrome really don't have that typically. They may, a person who is a sociopath may be able to understand what a person is thinking just by observing them. It's almost like they have a sixth sense. An individual who is a narcissist, very good at cognitive empathy. That's almost one of the traits that makes them so obvious. But people with Asperger syndrome, we don't have that empathy. So when people say that Aspies don't have empathy, that's what they're talking about, cognitive empathy. But affective empathy, that's an entirely different thing. Yes, we do care about people. Now, the downside of that is sometimes we care too much. Sometimes we care more about other people than we care for ourselves. Well, the question is, do you have affective empathy? Another way to phrase the question is, do you sometimes care more about other people than you care about yourselves? And if the answer is yes, all right, put down a check mark and let us know in the comment section how many of these you got right. And if you look in the description, I'm going to put all these things down there. So after the video, you go down and read them and take a look at your screen now. And you see those rectangles? That's because this is not ending just because the video ends. We have other videos, lots of them. And you can enjoy yourself, and hey, while you're alone, expand your thinking and click on one of those rectangle boxes.